When Ember Ashworth's blood called to the Lycan King during a rogue attack, 23 years of lies about her weak Omega status shattered in an instant, revealing a bloodline so rare and powerful that every territory would kill to claim her. But will the king who marked her as his mate protect her from the growing threats? Or has she traded one cage for a far more dangerous one? The smell of fresh blood made Ember's stomach turn as she knelt beside the injured hunter. His leg was twisted at a wrong angle, bone showing through torn skin. She pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, while other pack members stood around whispering. "Should have been more careful," someone muttered. "Stupid human wandered too close to our territory." Ember ignored them. Her healing gift wasn't strong like the other Omegas, but she could still help. The man's breathing was getting weaker. She closed her eyes and tried to push her energy into him, the way her grandmother had taught her before she died. "Move aside, Ember." Alpha Marcus pushed past her, his massive frame blocking the morning sun. Real healers are here now. She stepped back, watching as Sarah Moonwhisper took her place. Sarah was everything Ember wasn't. Confident, powerful, wanted by every unmated male in the pack. Her healing light flowed into the hunter like golden water, mending bone and flesh in seconds. "See how it's done?" Sarah smiled sweetly, but her eyes were cold. "Some of us are actually useful." The crowd dispersed as the hunter was carried away. Ember gathered her simple herb bag, the same one she'd used since she turned 18 5 years ago. Most Omegas her age were already mated with pups of their own. She was still living in the pack house basement, forgotten by everyone except when they needed someone to clean or fetch things. The winter air bit through her thin jacket as she walked toward the forest edge. Her breath came out in white puffs that disappeared quickly, like everything else about her. The convergence was only 3 days away, the biggest gathering of all 5 Lycan territories in 50 years. Every unmated wolf would be there, hoping to find their destined mate. Ember had stopped hoping years ago. Her small room in the basement was cold and damp. Water stains covered the walls like ugly brown flowers. She sat on her narrow bed and pulled out the invitation that had been shoved under her door that morning. Heavy paper, gold writing, the official seal of all 5 territory leaders, pressed into red wax. "You are invited to attend the Great Convergence," she read aloud to the empty room. Her voice sounded tiny in the silence. She almost laughed, invited, like she had a choice. Every pack member had to attend, even the useless ones. She would go, she would serve food and clean up messes, and she would watch as everyone else found love while she remained invisible. A knock on her door made her jump. "Ember? You in there?" She recognized Jake's voice. He was one of the few pack members who bothered being nice to her, though she suspected it was only because his sister had asked him to check on her sometimes. "Come in," she called. Jake poked his head through the doorway. His brown hair was messy from the wind, and he smelled like pine trees and motor oil from his job at the garage in town. "Heard what happened with the hunter today." Sarah being her usual charming self, Ember shrugged. She wasn't wrong. Her healing is better than mine. "Different doesn't mean worse," Jake said, stepping fully into the room. He looked around at the bare walls and single chair with a frown. "You know, there's talk that some very important wolves are coming to this convergence. Kings, even. So maybe it's time you stopped hiding down here." He sat on the edge of her bed, making the old springs creak. "You're 23, Em. Don't you want more than this?" She wanted to tell him that wanting hurt too much, that hoping for something better only made the disappointment worse when nothing changed. Instead, she folded the invitation carefully and set it on her small table next to a wilted flower she'd found yesterday. "I should probably start packing," she said quietly. Jake studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Yeah, you should." He stood up and moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think Sarah's jealous of you." "Jealous of what?" "You have something she'll never have," he said with a mysterious smile. "You have a good heart." After he left, Ember lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Water had left strange patterns in the paint that almost looked like faces in the dim light. She traced them with her eyes, wondering what it would feel like to matter to someone, to be wanted instead of just tolerated. The convergence would bring together thousands of wolves from all 5 territories, alphas, betas, omegas, all hoping to find their perfect match. The lucky ones would return home with their destined mates. The unlucky ones would wait another year. And then there were wolves like her, who had stopped believing in destiny altogether. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine what it would feel like to have someone look at her the way mated pairs looked at each other, with love, with desire, with the kind of connection that made everything else fade away. It seemed as impossible as flying. Tomorrow she would help with the final preparations. She would pack her one good dress and her herb supplies. She would travel to the ancient gathering grounds with the rest of her pack and pretend to be hopeful. But tonight, in the privacy of her cold little room, she allowed herself to dream of something more. The scream that woke Ember wasn't human. She bolted upright in her sleeping bag, heart hammering as the sound echoed through the temporary camp. Around her, other pack members were stirring, confused voices mixing with the smell of fear and adrenaline. The convergence grounds had been peaceful when they'd arrived that afternoon, thousands of wolves setting up their territories under the ancient oak trees. Now something was very wrong. "Everyone stay calm," Alpha Marcus's voice boomed across their section of camp. "Betas, form a perimeter. Omegas, stay with the supplies." Ember grabbed her jacket and followed the other Omegas toward the center of their area, but her feet carried her in the opposite direction. The scream had come from the medical tent where she'd been helping organize supplies earlier. If someone was hurt, they might need her healing gift, weak as it was. The tent flap was torn, hanging in shreds. Inside, she found chaos. Medical supplies scattered everywhere, the smell of blood thick in the air. A young Omega from the Eastern Territory was huddled in the corner, her eyes wide with terror. What happened? Ember knelt beside her, trying to keep her voice calm. "It came out of nowhere," the girl whispered. "Huge, with red eyes. Not like any wolf I've ever seen. It grabbed Dr. Chen and just disappeared." Ember's blood turned to ice. Dr. Chen was the main healer for the entire convergence, the one person everyone relied on for serious injuries. Without him, any major accident could turn deadly. "Did you see which direction it went?" The girl pointed toward the forest with a shaking hand. "Into the old growth area. But you can't go after it. That thing wasn't natural." Ember looked at the destroyed tent, at the girl's terrified face, at the blood on the ground that might belong to the only person who could save lives this weekend. She thought about all the times she'd been told to stay back, stay safe, stay useless. She grabbed a handful of medical supplies and stuffed them into her jacket pockets. "Tell Alpha Marcus what you told me," she said, standing up. "I'm going to find Dr. Chen." "Are you crazy? You'll get yourself killed." Maybe, but doing nothing felt worse than dying. The forest beyond the camp was older than memory, full of trees so massive that 5 people holding hands couldn't wrap around their trunks. Moonlight filtered through the branches in silver patches, creating a maze of light and shadow. Ember moved as quietly as she could, following the trail of broken branches and disturbed earth. The smell hit her first, something rotten and wild, like meat left too long in the sun. Then she heard voices ahead, low and urgent. She crept closer, hiding behind a fallen log covered in moss. "Told you to be more careful," someone was saying. "If the other territories find out what we're doing." "Relax," a second voice replied. "One missing healer won't raise suspicions. By the time anyone realizes he's gone, we'll have what we need." Ember peered over the log and felt her stomach drop. Dr. Chen was tied to a tree, unconscious but breathing. Standing over him were 2 men she didn't recognize, both wearing the dark clothing of rogues. wolves who'd been banished from their packs for crimes too terrible to forgive. The ritual circle is almost ready, the first man continued. His blood will open the barrier, and then we can take what we came for. And if the kings try to stop us? The second man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Let them try. They have no idea what's hidden beneath these grounds. Once we control it, every territory will bow to us. Ember's mind raced. Whatever they were planning, it was bigger than just kidnapping Dr. Chen. They were after something powerful enough to challenge the territory. Kings, the most feared wolves in existence. She had to get back to camp and warn everyone. She started to back away, but her foot caught on a branch. The sharp crack echoed through the trees like a gunshot. Both rogues turned toward her hiding spot, their eyes beginning to glow with an unnatural red light. "Well, well," the first one said, smiling to show teeth that were too sharp. "Looks like we have a witness." Ember ran. Behind her, she could hear them giving chase, their footsteps crushing through the underbrush like thunder. Her small Omega form wasn't built for speed, and she knew they would catch her within minutes. But maybe she could lead them away from Dr. Chen long enough for someone else to find him. A root caught her ankle and sent her tumbling into a clearing she didn't recognize. As she struggled to her feet, she realized she was completely lost. The sounds of pursuit had stopped, which somehow made everything worse. She spun in a circle, trying to figure out which way led back to camp. "You shouldn't be here." The voice came from directly behind her, so close she could feel breath on her neck. But when she turned around, no one was there. "Show yourself," she whispered, her voice cracking with fear. "I said, you shouldn't be here." This time, the voice came from her left. She turned again and found herself face to face with a man who made every instinct in her body scream both danger and safety at the same time. He was tall, with silver eyes that seemed to glow in the moonlight, and dark hair that fell across his forehead in waves. His clothes were simple but expensive looking, and he moved with the fluid grace of a predator. But it was his scent that made her wolf whimper and press close to the surface. Pine smoke and winter storms. Power so absolute it made her knees weak. "Who are you?" she managed to ask. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through to her soul. "More interesting question. Who are you, little Omega, and why do you smell like fear and determination in equal measure?" Blood splattered across the marble floor as screams erupted from the grand ballroom. Ember's heart hammered against her ribs when the crystal chandelier above her head exploded into 1,000 deadly pieces. 3 massive wolves with foam dripping from their jaws had crashed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, their red eyes promising death to anyone in their path. "Rogues!" someone shrieked, and chaos consumed the Convergence celebration like wildfire. Ember pressed herself against a marble pillar, watching in horror as elegantly dressed shifters scrambled for safety. The rogues moved with unnatural speed, their bodies wrong somehow, too thin, too aggressive, muscles bulging in places that defied nature. Silver poisoning, she realized with growing dread. It drove wolves completely insane. A young beta girl tripped near the destroyed buffet table, her ankle twisted at an ugly angle. The largest rogue spotted her immediately, lips pulling back to reveal teeth stained with something dark and terrible. Ember's feet moved before her brain could catch up. "Hey!" she shouted, grabbing a heavy serving tray from the scattered feast. "Over here!" The rogue's attention snapped to her like a rubber band, and Ember's stomach dropped to her toes. What had she just done? Her wolf was barely the size of a normal dog. She couldn't fight something like this. But the beta girl was crawling away now, tears streaming down her face, and that had to count for something. The rogue charged, and time seemed to slow. Ember could smell its rotten breath, see the madness swirling in those bloodshot eyes. Her body began to shift automatically, bones stretching and reforming, but something felt different this time. Power flooded through her like lightning, making her skin burn and her vision sharpen beyond anything she'd ever experienced. When her paws hit the ground, they weren't small and delicate like usual. They were massive, equipped with claws that could tear through steel. Her jaw felt heavy with fangs that belonged on a wolf twice her normal size. Confusion crashed through her mind, but there was no time to think about it. The rogue slammed into her with the force of a speeding truck. Pain exploded across her shoulder, but instead of being crushed, Ember found herself rolling with the impact and coming up on her feet. Her new strength felt like wearing armor made of pure energy. She struck back instinctively, her enlarged paw connecting with the rogue's ribs. The sound of breaking bones echoed through the ballroom as her attacker flew backward, smashing through a decorative fountain. Water and stone scattered everywhere. Around her, the battle raged on. Alpha males in their war forms tackled the other two rogues, while pack members helped the injured escape through side doors. But Ember couldn't focus on anything except the impossible reality of her own body. This wasn't her wolf, this was something else entirely. The rogue she'd hit struggled to its feet, shaking its head like it couldn't believe what had just happened. Neither could she. When it lunged again, Ember met it head-on, her newfound power singing through every muscle. Her teeth found its throat, and the fight ended with a wet, final sound. Silence fell over the ruined ballroom like a heavy blanket. Ember shifted back to human form, her party dress torn and bloody, her entire body shaking with leftover adrenaline. Every eye in the room was fixed on her with expressions ranging from shock to fear to something that looked uncomfortably like hunger. "Impossible," whispered Elder Moira, her weathered face pale as moonlight. "That size, that strength, it's not possible for an Omega." Alpha Silvermoon, her own pack leader, stared at her like she was a stranger. "Ember, what did you just do?" Before she could answer, a warm hand touched her shoulder. Thane appeared beside her, his silver eyes blazing with something that made her knees weak. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire ballroom. Magnificent. But the word felt heavy with implications she didn't understand. Around them, whispers started spreading like poison through the gathered crowd. Other alphas were pushing forward now, their expressions calculating and sharp. She caught fragments of conversation that made her stomach twist with new kinds of fear. Bloodline testing immediately. Can't let her leave our territory. Worth more than all 5 packs combined. Ember's head spun as the reality crashed over her. Whatever had just happened, whatever she'd become during that fight, it had changed everything. The girl who'd walked into this celebration, invisible and unwanted, was gone. In her place stood someone who apparently made powerful wolves look at her like she was made of gold. Thane's hand tightened protectively on her shoulder, and when she looked up at him, she saw her own confusion reflected in his ancient eyes. But underneath that, something else flickered recognition, as if he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his voice meant for her ears alone. "All of us. There are things about your family history that you need to know." The weight of those unspoken secrets pressed down on her like the roof might collapse. Everything she'd believed about herself, about her place in the pack, about her future, all of it was crumbling around her feet like sand. As pack members began cleaning up the destruction and tending to the wounded, Ember caught sight of her reflection in a broken piece of mirror. The face looking back at her was the same, but her eyes held something new. Power, yes, but also the terrible knowledge that her life had just taken a turn into completely unknown territory. The questions burning in her chest multiplied like rabbits. What was she really? Why had her wolf suddenly become something out of legends? And why did every alpha in the room now look at her like she was either their greatest prize or their most dangerous threat? The council chamber felt like a tomb, as Ember sat surrounded by 5 territorial alphas, 3 elders, and enough political tension to choke on. Ancient stone walls covered in carved moon phases seemed to press closer with each passing minute, and the heavy wooden table between them groaned under the weight of old secrets finally coming to light. Elder Moira spread a yellowed scroll across the table with hands that trembled slightly. "This bloodline chart hasn't seen daylight in over 200 years, she announced, her voice echoing in the vaulted space. "We hoped it would stay buried forever." Ember's throat felt dry as dust. "What does it say?" "That you're not just any Omega." Elder Ravencrest leaned forward, his pale eyes intense. "Your great-great-grandmother was Selene Moonwright, the last known carrier of a gene we thought died with her." The name hit Ember like cold water. She'd heard whispers of the Moonwright line in old stories' wolves, who could supposedly channel the moon's power directly through their bodies. But those were just fairy tales, weren't they? Moonwright wolves were incredibly rare, Alpha Silvermoon explained, and his voice carried a note of apology that made Ember's stomach clench. They could tap into lunar energy during fights, making them nearly unstoppable, but they were also incredibly dangerous if they couldn't control their power. Dangerous how? Fane's question cut through the air like a blade. Elder Moira's weathered fingers traced symbols on the ancient parchment. The last 3 Moonwright wolves lost control completely. One leveled an entire forest during a territorial dispute. Another killed her own pack members during a power surge. The third simply vanished one night, leaving behind a crater where her den used to be. Ice spread through Ember's veins. "Are you saying I'm going to hurt people?" "We're saying that's why your parents chose to suppress your wolf," Alpha Silvermoon admitted, shame coloring his features. "When you were born, we detected trace amounts of the Moonwright markers in your blood. The decision was made to keep you weak rather than risk another catastrophe. The betrayal hit harder than any physical blow. You drugged me for my entire life. Suppressants in your food, yes, we thought. You stole 23 years from me." Ember shot to her feet, fury blazing through her chest. "You made me believe I was worthless when I was actually—" She couldn't finish the sentence. What was she, exactly? "Priceless," Fane said quietly, and something in his tone made every head turn toward him. "A Moonwright Omega is beyond rare. She's a treasure that could shift the balance of power between all our territories." Alpha Marcus from the Eastern Territory cleared his throat meaningfully, which raises important questions about her future. A wolf with that kind of potential needs proper guidance. Guidance. Alpha Silvermoon agreed too quickly. Perhaps a strategic mating arrangement with someone experienced enough to help her control. Fane's growl cut through the suggestion like a chainsaw. "She's not a political tool to be bartered." "With respect, Your Majesty," Elder Ravencrest interjected smoothly, "she's also not equipped to handle this power alone. The Moonwright gene comes with madness more often than mastery." Ember felt the walls closing in as the conversation continued over her head. They were talking about her future, her choices, her life, as if she wasn't even in the room. The familiar feeling of being powerless washed over her, and for a moment she was 12 years old again, listening to adults decide she wasn't worth training for combat. But then she remembered the rogue flying through the fountain, the strength flowing through her like liquid fire, the way every wolf in that ballroom had looked at her with something approaching awe. She wasn't powerless anymore. "Stop," she said firmly, and conversations died mid-sentence. "All of you, just stop." The authority in her own voice surprised her. When had she learned to command a room full of alphas? "I understand that my bloodline makes me valuable," she continued, meeting each gaze around the table. "I also understand that it makes me dangerous. But I'm not a child anymore, and I'm certainly not property to be managed by committee." Alpha Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. "What are you proposing?" "Training. Real training, not suppression." The words came easier now, fueled by years of suppressed frustration. "I want to learn what I'm capable of and how to control it. But I make my own choices about mating, about alliances, about everything else." "The risks," Elder Moira started, "are mine to take," Ember finished. You can't protect me from my own nature forever. The suppressants clearly aren't working anymore anyway. Thane's hand found hers under the table, his touch warm and steadying. She's right. Suppression failed the moment her power broke through during the attack. Now we either help her master it, or we wait for the next crisis to push her completely over the edge. The room fell silent except for the soft scratching of claws against stone someone's nervous tell. Ember could practically see the political calculations spinning through every mind present. A Moonlight Omega who could control her power would be an invaluable ally. One who lost control would be everyone's worst nightmare. There are facilities, Alpha Marcus said slowly. Remote locations where she could train without endangering civilian populations. Absolutely not. Thane's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. She's not going into exile because you're afraid of what she might become. Then what do you suggest? Alpha Silvermoon demanded. She trains here, with me. Thane's grip on her hand tightened slightly. I've had 3 centuries to learn control. If anyone can help her master lunar channeling safely, it's me. The implications of that statement hit the room like a bomb. Training together meant constant contact, shared territory, intimate knowledge of each other's powers and weaknesses. It was practically a declaration of intent. Ember felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't pull away from his touch. The mate bond between them was still new and fragile, but it was also the strongest thing she'd ever felt. If she was going to trust anyone with the dangerous parts of herself, it would be him. The other territories will never agree to that, Elder Ravencrest warned. They'll see it as the Lycan King hoarding a powerful resource. Then they're welcome to challenge the arrangement, Thane replied mildly, but steel glinted in his silver eyes. I'm sure that would go well for them. The threat hung in the air like smoke, and Ember realized she was witnessing something historic. Thane wasn't just offering to train her, he was claiming her, publicly and politically, in front of representatives from every major territory. The question was, did she want to be claimed? Ember's hands shook as she stared at the ancient book Elder Moira had dropped on her table. The pages showed drawings of wolves, with silver eyes and moon-white fur. Wolves that looked exactly like her transformed state during the rogue attack. Moonlight wolves can heal entire packs, the Elder explained, her voice barely a whisper. But they can also destroy them if their power goes wrong. The small cabin Thane had given her suddenly felt like a prison. Outside, she could hear pack members talking in hushed voices about her condition. Some called her a blessing. Others whispered she was a curse waiting to happen. The worst part? She didn't know which group was right. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting another elder with more warnings about her dangerous bloodline. Instead, Thane stepped through the doorway carrying a steaming mug and wearing an expression she couldn't read. "You haven't eaten today," he said, setting the mug beside her. The smell of honey and chamomile filled the space between them. Or yesterday, according to Maya. "I'm not hungry." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Truth was, every time she tried to eat, her enhanced senses picked up the fear scent from other pack members. It made her stomach twist into knots. Thane settled into the chair across from her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Tell me, what's really bothering you?" "Everything," the word burst out before she could stop it. 3 days ago, I was nobody. Now I'm supposedly this powerful creature that everyone either wants to control or kill. And you," she gestured helplessly at him, "you're the Lycan King. You could have anyone. Why would you want someone like me?" His silver eyes grew intense. "Because you're brave enough to gather herbs alone in a snowstorm. Because you threw yourself between Maya's pup and those rogues without thinking twice. Because when I found you bleeding, your first instinct was to hide your pain rather than ask for help." He leaned forward. "Those things have nothing to do with what bloodline runs through your veins. But the mate bond started the moment I caught your scent, before anyone knew what you were." His voice grew rough with emotion. "I've spent 300 years waiting for my mate. Do you think I'd recognize her wrong?" Ember felt something crack open in her chest. Not painful, but like a door she'd kept locked, finally swinging free. "Show me," she whispered. "Show you what?" "What you saw that day, before the attack, before anyone knew about the Moonlight thing. Show me how you saw me." Thane stood slowly, extending his hand. "Come with me." They walked through the packlands as twilight painted the sky purple and gold. He led her past the main buildings, past the training grounds where young wolves practiced their fighting forms, all the way to a small meadow she'd never noticed before. Ancient oak trees circled the clearing like gentle guardians. "This is where pack members come when they need to think," Thane explained. "It's neutral ground, no politics, no judgments, no expectations." He turned to face her fully. "When I first saw you in the forest, you were talking to an injured squirrel. You thought no one was watching." Heat flooded Ember's cheeks. "You saw that? You spent 20 minutes figuring out how to splint its tiny leg with grass stems and tree bark. Then you carried it back to its nest." His smile was soft, almost wondering. "Most wolves would have ignored it or put it out of its misery. You chose compassion for something that couldn't possibly benefit you. It was just a squirrel." "It was everything." Thane stepped closer, his hands hovering near her face like he was afraid she might disappear. "In that moment, I saw exactly who you are. Kind, determined, protective of things smaller than yourself. That's what called to my wolf, Ember. Not power, not bloodlines, you." The mate bond hummed between them, stronger than ever. But this time, instead of feeling overwhelming, it felt like coming home. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of me? Of disappointing you. Of not being what everyone expects now that they know what I am." She swallowed hard. "Of losing myself in all these new expectations." Thane's hands finally made contact, cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "Then we'll figure it out together. No expectations, no pressure, just us." The moon chose that moment to break through the clouds, bathing the meadow in silver light. Ember felt her wolf stir, but not with the wild power she'd experienced during the attack. This was quieter, steadier, like a river instead of a flood. "Dance with me," Thane said suddenly. "There's no music. Listen closer." She tilted her head, letting her enhanced hearing expand. Night birds called to each other across the trees. Wind rustled through leaves. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled their evening songs. All of it together created a symphony she'd never noticed before. Thane's arms came around her waist as she placed her hands on his shoulders. They swayed together under the starlight. No words needed. For the first time since the attack, Ember felt peace settle into her bones. "Better?" he asked after several minutes. "Much." She looked up at him, seeing not the feared Lycan King, but simply the man who'd chosen her. "Thane?" "Yes? Whatever happens with this Moonlight thing, I'm glad it led me to you." His answer was a kiss that tasted like promises and felt like forever. The emergency pack meeting started before dawn, and Ember knew it meant trouble the second she walked into the great hall. Alpha Marcus stood at the center, with two strangers flanking him, wolves whose scents carried the sharp edge of authority and barely controlled aggression. Their eyes locked onto her the moment she appeared, studying her like she was prey they were deciding how to hunt. "Ember." Alpha Marcus's voice carried formal coldness that made her wolf bristle. "Meet Alpha Kieran from the northern reaches and Alpha Celine from the eastern wilds. They've come to discuss your situation." Thane materialized beside her so quickly she jumped. His presence should have been comforting, but the tension radiating from him set her more on edge. "Discuss what, exactly?" His tone could have frozen water. Alpha Kieran stepped forward, his pale blue eyes never leaving Ember's face. "The Moonlight bloodline belongs to all territories, not just one. Keeping such power concentrated here creates dangerous imbalances. She's not property to be distributed," Thane growled. "Isn't she?" Alpha Celine's voice was honey over steel. "A single Moonlight could tip the balance of power between all 5 territories. Surely the king understands the political implications." Ember felt like she was watching a chess game, where she was the most important piece but had no say in how she moved. "Excuse me," she said loudly. All eyes turned to her. "Maybe someone should ask what I want?" Alpha Kieran's smile was sharp as broken glass. "What you want is irrelevant. You're too young and untrained to understand the consequences of your choices." The dismissal hit her like a physical blow. 3 days of growing confidence crumbled under the weight of familiar condescension. She was nobody again, just a weak Omega whose opinions didn't matter. "That's enough." Thane's voice carried the absolute authority of command. "You will not speak to my mate that way." "Your mate?" Alpha Selene laughed, but the sound held no humor. "A convenient claiming, Your Majesty. How interesting that you discovered this bond right after her true nature was revealed. Are you questioning the legitimacy of our mating?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I'm questioning the timing." Selene's amber eyes glittered with malice. Perhaps a more established pairing would better serve everyone's interests. "My nephew, for instance, is unmated and well-trained in managing powerful bloodlines." Ember's wolf snarled inside her chest. The suggestion that she could be passed around like a breeding prize made her sick. But worse was the tiny voice in her head, wondering if they were right, if Thane's interest was really about politics rather than genuine attraction. "The girl needs proper training," Alpha Kieran added. "My pack has dealt with rare bloodlines before. We know how to contain dangerous power." "Contain?" Ember found her voice again, stronger this time. "Like keeping me locked up?" "Like keeping everyone safe," Kieran replied coldly. "Moonlight wolves who lose control don't just hurt themselves. They devastate everything within miles." "Enough." Elder Moira's cracked voice cut through the growing argument. She shuffled into the great hall, leaning heavily on her walking stick, her ancient eyes sharp as a hawk's. "You speak of things you don't understand, Alpha Kieran." "With respect, Elder, historical records show. Historical records written by cowards who feared what they couldn't control." Moira planted her walking stick with a sharp crack. "I lived through the last Moonlight's reign." Isla Stormcaller wasn't dangerous because of her power. She was dangerous because fools like you tried to cage her until she went mad. The hall fell silent except for the crackling of torches on the walls. Ember felt ice form in her stomach. What happened to her? Moira's eyes grew distant with painful memory. She loved a beta from a rival pack. Their alphas forbade the match, said she needed to mate within her own territory for political stability. When she refused, they used silver chains and suppression drugs to force compliance. And? Thane's voice was carefully controlled. She broke free during the full moon and leveled both pack houses. Killed over 200 wolves before my grandmother managed to stop her. Moira looked directly at Ember. Power without choice becomes rage. Rage without outlet becomes destruction. Alpha Selene shifted uncomfortably. That won't happen here. We have better methods now. You have the same fear dressed in prettier words, Elder Moira snapped. Nothing has changed except your vocabulary. Ember felt the weight of everyone's expectations crushing down on her shoulders. The other alphas wanted to control her. Her own pack was terrified of her. Even Thane, for all his gentle words, represented a political alliance that benefited his kingdom. I need air, she announced, standing abruptly. Ember. Thane reached for her, but she was already moving. No. The word came out sharper than intended. All of you are talking about me like I'm not even here. Like my choices don't matter. Like I'm just some weapon you all want to claim. She looked around the room, meeting each alpha's gaze in turn. Maybe I don't want to be anyone's political prize. She left the great hall with their shocked silence following her like a shadow, her wolf crying out for freedom from all these suffocating expectations. Outside, the morning air tasted like possibility and escape. For the first time in days, Ember seriously considered running. But where could someone like her possibly hide? The silver chains around Ember's wrists burned like fire, but not as much as the betrayal cutting through her chest. Elder Moira stood over her in the underground chamber, eyes glowing with ancient magic that made the air taste like copper and death. You really thought it would be that simple? Moira's laugh echoed off stone walls, carved with symbols that hurt to look at. A weak little Omega becoming Luna? The moon goddess has a sense of humor. Ember tested the chains again, feeling her moonlight power slam against barriers she couldn't break. Above them, she could hear fighting, Thane's roars of rage shaking the very foundation as he searched for her. 3 hours ago, she'd been planning their official coronation ceremony. Now she was trapped 50 feet underground, while her own pack elder revealed herself as the true enemy. The suppressants weren't to hide your power from others, Moira continued, circling like a predator. They were to hide it from yourself. Do you know what happens when a moonlight reaches full strength without proper training? The question hung in the air like poison. Ember's wolf whined in the back of her mind, sensing danger beyond anything they'd faced before. Through their mate bond, she felt Thane's desperate fury as he tore through every building in the territory, looking for her. They go mad, Moira whispered. They burn out like dying stars, taking everyone around them with them. Your bloodline wasn't extinct by accident, child. They were eliminated because they became monsters. Terror crept up Ember's spine, but something else rose with it. Anger. Real, bone-deep rage. At 23 years of lies, at being treated like broken glass when she was made of steel. You're lying. Am I? Moira pressed a silver blade against Ember's throat. Feel that power building inside you right now. Feel how it wants to explode outward, to destroy everything that threatens you. That's not control, little wolf. That's a bomb waiting to detonate. The chamber door exploded inward, stone and metal flying everywhere as Thane burst through in his massive wolf form. His silver fur was streaked with blood, his eyes wild with protective fury that made the very air vibrate with dominance. Behind him came her pack, her friends, her chosen family, all ready to die for her. But Moira just smiled and pressed the blade deeper. One more step and I open her throat. Then we'll see how long your precious mate bond lasts. Thane shifted back to human form, naked and magnificent and absolutely lethal. Let her go. I'm trying to save her. Moira's voice cracked with something that might have been genuine pain. Don't you understand? She's going to burn out. Every moonlight in history has lost control and destroyed everything they loved. I've spent decades preparing for this moment, finding ways to contain the power safely. By lying to her? Thane's voice was deadly quiet. By stealing her choices? By keeping everyone alive, Moira screamed. The words hit Ember like lightning, and suddenly she understood. The fear in people's eyes when they looked at her now. The way conversations stopped when she entered rooms. The careful distance even her friends maintained. They weren't just awed by her power. They were terrified of it. And maybe they should be. She could feel it building inside her. That wild energy that wanted to lash out at anything that hurt her. The silver chains weren't just restraining her body. They were the only thing keeping her from accidentally killing everyone in this room with uncontrolled power. Tell me how to control it, she said quietly. Moira blinked, clearly not expecting surrender. What? If you really want to help me, if you really want to keep people safe, then teach me control. Don't chain me up like an animal. Don't lie to me anymore. Just help me. The blade wavered against her throat. Through the mate bond, she felt Thane's surprise and something that might have been pride. Her wolf stirred, not with rage but with determination. She wasn't going to be a victim anymore. Not of fear, not of prophecies, not of her own power. It's not that simple, Moira whispered. Nothing about my life has been simple, Ember replied. But I'm done letting other people make my choices for me. I'm done being treated like I'm made of glass. If I'm dangerous, then teach me to be dangerous safely. If I'm powerful, then help me use that power right. Around the room, she felt the shift in everyone watching, not just in their stance or breathing, but in the way they looked at her. She wasn't the lost little Omega anymore. Wasn't even just the discovered Moonlight. She was becoming something new. Someone who faced her monsters head-on instead of running from them. "The training will be brutal," Moira said, but the blade moved away from Ember's throat. "Ancient methods, painful lessons. You might not survive it." Ember met her eyes steadily. "I definitely won't survive staying weak." 2 years later, Ember stood on the balcony of the Royal Tower, watching the first snow of winter fall over the 5 territories that were now truly united under their rule. Her hands, once soft from herb gathering, were scarred from training that had pushed her to the very edge of sanity and back. But they were steady now, powerful now, completely under her control. The door opened behind her, and she didn't need to turn to know it was Thane. Their mate bond hummed with contentment as he wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them watching their world settle into peaceful evening. "The Northern Territory sent word," he murmured against her ear. "They want to send their young Moonlight to train with you." Ember smiled, remembering the terrified 14-year-old boy whose power had manifested during a thunderstorm, accidentally bringing down 3 buildings before his family managed to contain him. "When can he get here?" "Next week. That'll make 5 students you're training now. 5 young wolves who might have been killed out of fear if Ember hadn't proven that Moonlight power could be controlled, channeled, used for protection instead of destruction." The irony wasn't lost on her. The bloodline that had once been eliminated for being too dangerous was now becoming the foundation for a new kind of peace. "Council meeting tomorrow," Thane continued, his voice taking on that careful tone that meant complicated politics. "The Western Territories want to discuss the alliance terms again." Ember sighed, turning in his arms. 2 years of leadership had taught her that being Luna involved a lot more paperwork and diplomatic dinners than anyone had mentioned. "Let me guess. They want to know if our children will inherit Moonlight abilities." Among other concerns, the children question always came up eventually. Everyone wanted to know what happened when Moonlight genes mixed with royal bloodlines, whether their offspring would be assets or weapons. Sometimes Ember wondered if people saw her as anything more than a breeding experiment wrapped in royal titles. But then she'd catch Thane looking at her the way he was now, like she'd hung the moon itself, and remember that at least one person loved her for who she was, not what she could produce. "There's something else," he said, and she heard the excitement he was trying to hide. "Something good. Tell me." Instead of answering, he led her inside to his desk, where a letter waited, sealed with wax that shimmered like starlight. Ember's breath caught as she recognized the symbol pressed into it. Not from any earthly pack, but from the moon goddess herself. "When did this arrive?" she whispered. "An hour ago. I wanted to wait for you to open it." With trembling fingers, Ember broke the seal and unfolded paper that felt like moonbeams against her skin. The words that appeared were written in silver ink that seemed to move and dance. "To the Luna who chose courage over fear, wisdom over power, love over safety, your trials have been witnessed and your growth celebrated. The Moonlight bloodline was never meant to be extinct. It was meant to evolve. You have proven worthy of the next step. When the moon reaches full in 3 nights, come to the sacred grove alone. Your true training begins now." Ember's hand shook as she read the words again. After 2 years of brutal practice, of learning to contain and channel her power, apparently she'd only been in the beginner class. "Are you afraid?" Thane asked softly, reading her expression. She considered the question seriously. 3 years ago, she would have been terrified. Even 1 year ago, the idea of more power, more responsibility, more ways to accidentally hurt the people she loved would have sent her into hiding. But now? Now she thought of her 5 students who looked at her with hope instead of fear. Of the territories that had stopped warring because they knew she could end conflicts before they started. Of the children who would grow up in a world where being different meant being valuable, not dangerous. "No," she said finally, and meant it completely. "I'm ready." Through their mate bond, she felt Thane's absolute faith in her. his unwavering certainty that whatever came next, she would handle it with the same strength and wisdom that had brought them this far. Around them, snow continued to fall, blanketing their world in peaceful white that promised new beginnings. 3 nights later, when the moon called her to destiny, Ember Wraithbane walked into the sacred grove, not as the unwanted Omega she'd once been, but as the Luna she'd chosen to become. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what she might find there. The future stretched before her like starlight, unknown but beautiful, challenging but full of hope. Whatever the moon goddess had planned for her next, Ember was ready to meet it head-on. After all, she'd learned the most important lesson of all. She was exactly as powerful as she chose to be, and exactly as worthy as she believed herself to be. Everything else was just details.